Hello, and welcome to episode 15 of Buxton Barrow Man, where I go through Buxton's history and clean up the town at the same time. Today's episode is about the history of Peak Forest, a murder story, and why Peak Forest is referred to as the Gretna Green of Derbyshire. Peak Forest is a small village. As of the last census in 2011, had a population of only 335 people. It's primarily built upon a four-way junction, with two smaller local roads intersecting with the A623. On the main road is the old reading rooms, built in 1880 and is now a nursery school. Further up there is also a primary school and a pub, the Devonshire Arms, directly next to it. Back up to the junction, heading up Church Lane, which weirdly within a short span becomes Old Dam, then Perrydale Road. But there's an old general store on the right, and further up on the left is the Wesley Chapel, built in 1851 for those who practice Wesleyanism, which I've spoke about before on the episode about Flash. Further up Church Lane we get to a small village square, and this actually is the part of Peak Forest that was settled earlier. It's called Dam as it sits at the end of Damdale. Pretty simple name. Now, Peak Forest's name is believed to have come from the old royal forests of High Peak, which you don't need to look at a map for long to realise that's no longer here. The royal forest was huge. In 1305 it was measured to cover around 100 square miles of the local area, and Peak Forest was at the heart of it. The forest was split into three sections: Hopedale, Longdondale and Campagna. The latter is French for open ground, and I might be mispronouncing it. The three sections of the forest are still marked today by the Edale Cross. Now, Peak Forest was mainly established after the 15th century, as beforehand the Royal Forest had strict rules on people living within the forest, as it was for hunting only. But the rules became more laxed and the land became privately owned, and the village of Peak Forest, as well as Dam, became fully established. One building I didn't mention on the main road earlier, it's the last major building to talk about, is the church dedicated to Charles, King and Martyr. That's King Charles I. The first church on this site was built in 1657. It was then later replaced in 1878 as a gift from the 8th Duke of Devonshire. And as you can see, it's quite a large church for such a small village, and it was once a very important one for all of Derbyshire. As before 1754, when the ruling was changed, the minister of Peak Forest Church could perform marriages without the need to read the banns, essentially meaning you could marry without permission from family members, which is an important piece of information for the murder story I'm going to end this video on. Over in the small mining town of Castleton, there once lived a young couple, who, like a Romeo and Juliet, were going against their family's wishes and had dreams of a better life. So one day, the couple met in secret at the Halfway House Inn, situated above Speedwell Mine. They talked about how they were going to escape from Castleton, set up a new life, and marry at Peak Forest. The couple spoke about taking money from their wealthy parents, believed to be a large sum of £200. They also spoke about a beautiful white horse with a new leather saddle that one of their parents had just acquired at market. And as they left the inn, one final remark was spoke. "I shall meet you in the town before sunset. From there we shall go through the windy gates and on to Peak Forest." Now, they weren't alone in this pub. 4 miners overheard this conversation. Back then it was almost impossible for miners to make a good living, and the thought of £200 between them was enough that they didn't need to exchange words to know what will happen the next day. And so, the following day, sun just setting, the couple were making a steady pace on that white horse up Winners Pass. That was till the miners took them from their saddle and threatened until they had every last penny. But that wasn't enough. One miner understood the severity of the situation if they were to be caught, and thus decided there would be no witnesses to this crime. And the couple was left stiff upon the ground, covered in blood within the windy gates, as the miners left with red right hands. Now, of course, it is a story. There are so many iterations of this, and this was sort of my take from what I could remember from my days of working at Speedwell Cavern. But for sure, there was once a couple on their way to Peak Forest to get married that had sadly never made it. But the story does continue for some, as they believe the miners were cursed by this money, their greed and bloodlust, and so in the following days they all proceeded to pass away. One from a blast in the mine, another took that white horse, it retaliated, threw him off, breaking its neck. Another, well, he had wounds when he murdered the couple, and their blood infected them and killed him. And the last was filled with so much guilt he took his own life within the mines, and supposedly they all still haunt Speedwell, attempting to assist the tour guides and tourists to redeem themselves from their merciless deeds. I can say there were some freaky things that did happen occasionally in Speedwell. I mean, the major thing was one of my colleagues was down at the bottom charging the boats at the end of the day. No one else in the entire system, and still heard a voice asking if he wanted a hand. And of course, declined and checked who was on the stairs, if anybody spoke to him, and there wasn't a single soul. I did clean up this episode, roughly 2 wheelbarrows full. Just off the A6, on the common, it filled up very quickly, there was a lot of rubbish there. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. Until next time, ta-ra. At one building, we're going to have to wait for these sirens to go past. Thank you.